Hi, welcome to September's Extreme Productivity Experiment. This is where it all started to go a little bit weird, a little bit wrong. So September's experiment was supposed to be called the Global Office. I was due to be during that month, so I'd just come back from my trip to Uganda. I was going to have a few days just back in the UK, and then I was due to go to Australia, and then also to I was speaking at a conference in Australia, coming back, and then very, very quickly going to Philadelphia, which is going to be a wedding, and then a work trip to Canada. So I had this month where it was just like, it was supposed to be like, I was going to rack up some air miles. It was going to be a frenetic month. Right at the very end of August, I was just coming back from Uganda, and literally the day before I got on the plane, I got a call from my wife, who was, at this point, she was just under 6 months pregnant. And we'd had this, this whole Uganda thing had been planned in for a long time, and it was like, we had this whole conversation about should I still go, and she was like, oh yeah, it'd be fine, you go to that, and then we were planning to go to Philadelphia together and all this stuff. But basically the call was, she had polyhydramnios, she was just in quite a bad state, and come back as soon as possible. We don't know what's going on. We then over the next few weeks had a whole series of different tests, and we found out that our son had and has a chromosomal disorder, and we ended up during that month in Great Ormond Street Hospital talking to a geneticist, and there was this one particular conversation where she was like, you might need to think about whether you want to have another kid. And we were like, well, we've not really thought about that. And she was like, yeah, because you'll need someone to look after this one, and you might never speak to your son. And, really just kind of laying on thick the worst case scenarios that we could expect. And the outlook was pretty bleak. It was as you can imagine, it was a really tough time. I had this whole experiment thing going on. It's like, hey, global office, travel around the world, all this stuff. And I just took one look at it and just thought, right, what do I need to do here? What's the truth of this situation? And the phrase that kept coming into my head was, when life gives you a lemon, make some lemonade. Deal with what you have. Focus on this as the truth. I always remember in these kind of situations, my very wise coach Rashid Ogunlaru, who always says, Graham, this is your material. So I was like, okay, so let's see how I can do something on productivity in the bad times. What is there to learn about productivity in the bad times? It was such a chaotic time. I was like, I'm not going to write a hypothesis for this. I'm not going to act in a certain way. I don't need to. I'm just going to live in the moment for this month, and just try and get through this. And I'm just going to blog about productivity in the bad times and kind of see what happens. It was a really, really difficult time. There was some times where I just didn't work at all. I just took time off and was just, so Shaz was in hospital for a bit, and I just wanted to be there in the hospital. There's some times where I was just sitting around at home and just wondering what's going to happen. It was obviously just a very emotional, very difficult time. Looking back on it now, so this is back in 2013. Looking back on it now, one of my reactions to it was something that felt very natural at the time, but I can see where I got that reaction since, which was I decided at that time that because we were living in London at the time and we were due to move back to Brighton, and we kind of put this move back to Brighton on hold because of what was going on. I was like, well, if I'm going to be in London, I need to sort of somehow make use of the fact that I'm in London and turn this into a positive thing. And I was thinking about this whole, when life gives you lemon, make lemonade. So with a contact of mine, we started up a soap company, and the idea was it was going to be a social enterprise. We were going to hire women who'd just come out of prison and who were stuck in this kind of cycle of reoffending in the justice system, and we were going to help them and coach them to run this business. And obviously, that's a pretty big undertaking to do at any time, let alone at a time when you're, feeling really vulnerable. You've got all this bad stuff going on. And at the time, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. It's like, when life gives you lemon, make lemonade. I'm going to be in London. I'm going to use this time really well. And I think those narratives were really created for me by the fact that, I think when you're in a dark place, one thing you look for is what's the one thing I can control. And for me, the one thing I can control is always my work, right? Like it's something I feel like I've probably got more sussed than certain other areas of my life. So it's like, okay, let me grasp at something here. And I was totally grasping at this thing. I didn't really have the time for it. I didn't really have the energy. I just didn't really have enough to give to it. And I really convinced myself that I did. I convinced everybody else around me in this project that I did. And in the end, what happened was there was actually some quite good outcomes with the project, but like my own involvement just it got less and less as the time went on, and I just felt like I was constantly just apologising and under pressure from it and all the rest of it. So looking back on it, it was like, would I do it again? I would do it again, but not at that time. Would I act differently in that particular moment? Like absolutely. And yeah, I kind of look back on it as a really weird, bittersweet sort of lesson, because I think some good stuff came out of the project. It in some ways gave me something to focus on. Shaz at the same time was like totally supportive over this thing, and I sort of talked to her since and said that was crazy of me trying to fit that into my schedule, right? And she's like, yeah, that was pretty crazy, but like she knew that at the time, still supported me anyway. And yeah, like it's not something that I think I would do again in a sort of dark situation, is kind of grasp at some big new project. It just seemed to make sense at the time. What else can I say about it, really? So that was when Life Gives You Lemon, Make Lemonade. In terms of what was happening next, so the following month's experiment was also changed by what was going on. And basically, so our kid was due in the November, so we were still actually a couple of months out at this point, and we were just having, all these regularly having tests. Oh, there's a really funny thing, which was so Shaz had polyhydramnios, which is basically too much fluid, and the fluid is the baby drinks it and then wheezes it out. And we were going every week to see this particular surgeon to have a scan, and he was kind of the child specialist. I can't remember what the name is now. But his name was Mr. Wee, so he was like there to measure the wee, and his name was Mr. Wee. So it's funny how in these like dark little moments, there's some weird little sort of dark humour kind of emerges. Go and see the wee man again. So that was a very, very testing, trying, difficult month in September. We scrapped the whole idea of global office and just focused on this thing of when life gives you lemon, make lemonade. We changed October's 1-2, which I'll come on to, and then you will find out in November that all sort of turned out quite well in the end, really. So the story kind of has quite a happy ending, but it was a very difficult couple of months towards the end of these experiments. So that's September. Join me for October of my Extreme Productivity Experiment series.